Have you heard that during World Wars, German soldiers would carry copies of Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and this ignited them to conquer the known world? It is one of those quotes that just lives with you, whether it is true or not. I do not know. It is an entertaining quip that gives us a simple answer to the madness of warfare. The point of that quote is to make us blame Nietzsche for the German love for war. Although Nietzsche is a very easy read compared to other continental philosophers, I doubt he was a key inspiration to boys who dream about adventure. The German culture is very rich, and if you want to find the original Germanic heroes and knight tales, then you read something completely different than a poetic philosophy book. How about a 12th century epic poem that tells you about those original German knights from the 5th and 6th century? I would call the German national epic more suitable book for giving twisted moral concepts to the German mindset. Maybe they work in unison like two different illegal substances and destroy the moral fiber of man. What am I talking about? Let's go through the Song of Nibelungs and learn what this book is all about. First of all, don't confuse this work to Richard Wagner's most prominent work, Ring of Nibelung. It takes several themes from the German national epic, the Song of Nibelungs, and other written German tales. The poem is a masterpiece, no doubt. Wagner could have laid out his musical themes all over the original work, since the story is coherent and quite well established in story-wise for its time. And it is the official national epic of Germany, and no doubt a great origin story for the nation. The problem is that you cannot adapt the original work as it is, since its moral backbone is totally dubious for a 19th century audience. There's a good reason why you have seen renditions of Ring of the Nibelungs and not that much of the Song of the Nibelungs. The moral choices of the knights are so alien that you see Attila the Hun as a relatively sane person in this poem. Let us start from the beginning. In the kingdom of Burgundy, have 3 brothers and a daughter. The daughter is called Kriemhild, and she is extremely beautiful. She is aware of her own beauty, and in the name of vanity, she refuses to marry a man, so she can sustain her beauty forever. Very modern problem, wouldn't you say? That is the problem when you live in a castle with mirrors and spend your day staring at yourself. The peasant women around the estate are probably too busy to work and are afraid of watching their reflections from the water, since Earthling might take their soul. One day she has a dream of a falcon being killed by 2 eagles. Her own mother explains that this is an omen that her future husband will be killed. So right in the beginning we get important reveal about how this story is going to go. This does not ruin the mood of the poem in any way. I would say the reader, or listener as you would have been during the Middle Ages, your senses are even more tense when the story progresses and you wish you could stop the events and prevent the coming tragedy. It is a great tension builder, quite surprisingly. But another important note is to take how archaic concept this is. Dreams as visions of the future, as signs of what is to become. We consider dreams to be silly and chaotic, but ancient people really believed in the message that they received in them. There is also some clairvoyance running in the mother's side apparently, since she also has later in that poem a dream that forecasts another part of the tragedy. Then we hear about Siegfried. He is just a perfect man. A son, a future ruler of his kingdom. His kingdom is in some flatlands near Rhine that are referred as Netherland, but don't confuse him with the Dutch. We can already tell that such a perfect specimen of a man is going to marry Kriemhild, and he will die. This is told to us by the minstrel that narrates the poem, and many times he breaks the 4th wall in humorous ways. While describing this outstanding fellow called Siegfried, he mentions that Siegfried is so well regarded and remembered because during tournaments he also gifted the musicians and entertainers with gold and food. So basically Siegfried bought the media landscape, or the minstrel is trying to remind his audience to feed him if they want to be good characters in his songs. These observations from the minstrel are quite important to the overall tone of the poem. He basically outlines, while describing Kriemhild, how women are going to cause the downfall of the men, and also adds questions and mystery to certain interactions that leave us a little bit vague. Anyway, Siegfried, the perfect man, has heard that the most beautiful woman lives in the Burgundy court, and he decides to travel there with his crew. This poem really puts effort into describe how every noble makes a big effort to show themselves off in the best possible light for their counterparts. So every time men travel to courts, or women come to greet them, they dress up in really nice clothes, armors, and jewelry. Many lines of the poem are dedicated to fashion, and these scenes happen just as often as tournaments in this poem. After arriving to the city of Worms, there is almost immediately a conflict with Siegfried's party and the court of Burgundy. It depicts how fragile these mighty men egos were, and you will come to see that more often in the poem. Things would escalate quickly without wise king to shoot down the younger ones. Burgundy is run by King Gunther and his two brothers. Their sister is Kriemhild, and it takes a whole year before Siegfried and Kriemhild get to meet. But before that, they have this lingering desire to meet each other. It is very well built up. Important character from the Burgundy court is a vassal or a knight called Hagen. He tells us something quite strange from Siegfried's past. Siegfried was traveling the land as a swashbuckler and had met some dwarves and giants in Norway that were trying to split a loot among them. But in the end, he ended up fighting them. Eventually, he defeats the so-called Nibelungs and gains access to their treasure cave that is run by a dwarf called Alberic. He becomes their king, receives their massive fortune that they have been gathering to their treasure chamber, magical sword, and a cloak of invisibility that also increases his strength. Then he also killed a dragon and took a bath in the dragon's blood, leaving his skin impenetrable to weapons. Now that is quite a brief backstory. It is interesting that when one Danish king notices Siegfried in the battlefield later, he tells everyone to back off because he has the devil in him. And that is what this dragon bloodbath might refer. Dragon as a depiction of Satan. But most interesting part for me are the dwarf, giants, and the mountain full of riches. It does make me think that this is allegory how Siegfried is connecting to his pagan origins in some ways. He has wealth that was accumulated by his previous ancestors. The dwarfs inside the mountains were the dead spirits of the ancestors, and giants were the ones that had left the remains of the stone altars, and even the mountains. Maybe I'm drawing too much from it, but earthlings are tiny people, spirits that we cannot see, and they live in the cracks of the rocks that hide immense wealth in there. Nibel is a mist, so I see connection to the mountain where the mist resides. And in the mist is hidden those spirits that never leave this earth. Whatever all that means in symbolic sense, it is out there and comes in handy during Siegfried's adventures, and he becomes the ruler of Nibelungs, a title that seems to be passed along the treasure. He first proves his loyalty to King Gunther when he goes to meet the invading Danes and Saxons by himself and with a small group of 1,000 knights. These huge logistical numbers are also a common sight in the poem. There are thousands of knights and squares that follow these heroes to their journeys, not just for war but as entourage. Usually they don't do much in the combat, and it is the heroic leaders that have bigger impact to the outcome of the battle. They never kill any other hero, no matter how small a side character he is in this poem. They are just cannon fodder that color the scene with their guts. Well, the outcome of this battle is obvious. Siegfried ambushes the camping armies, kills one king, and takes other one as ransom, who is demoralized when seeing it is the invincible Siegfried that is fighting against them, even though they had much larger numbers. But like I said, these numbers really don't matter. There is a brief lines in the poem how bloody saddles are being quickly removed, so that the widows wouldn't weep that much. Although most of these opponents are nameless and act there just to die, there is at least knowledge of how much sorrow war brings to their loved ones. Then again, when the war is over and it is time for celebration, the tournaments begin, and even the wounded men get up and celebrate the victory with military drills. One thing to notice is how generous all these great heroes are. The purpose of treasures, wealth, and golden here is to use it to give gifts to their knights and even prisoners of war. There are some expectations, but the amount of gold that is given as gifts in this poem is astonishing. Rarely nobody asks for a payment, but is showered with gifts after a good deed. For simply passing through a local court, you get several gold rings to your finger. Gunther really loves Siegfried at this point and persuades him to stay even longer in his court. There's a brief meeting with Kriemhild, and love-struck Siegfried finds it hard to leave the court. His opportunity comes when Gunther wants to get married to Brunhild, Queen of Iceland. It is a tricky quest because you have to do feats of strength against Brunhild if you want to marry her. Twist is that if you fail, then they get to kill you. So Gunther leaves with only 3 men from his court, and Siegfried is one of them. Siegfried tells the man to claim that he is only a vassal for Gunther, so that Brunhild would not be attracted to him, since he is the most upstanding specimen among them. Brunhild is immensely powerful in the challenge, and Gunther managed to beat her barely with Siegfried's help. Remember that cloak of invisibility that Siegfried has? Well, he uses it in the challenges against Brunhild. This will not be the only time he will deceive Brunhild. Brunhild wants to meet up with his nation one more time before embarking to Burgundy, and she calls for thousands of warriors to come for celebration. This worries Gunther's party, and Siegfried leaves to Norway to pick up his Nibelung army. Once he arrives to the castle, he has to once again overpower a giant and a dwarf Alberic. I don't know why he has to do this the second time here. Maybe it is a remains of an older poem, but either way, he comes to the farewell party with thousands of Nibelungen, who are giants and dwarfs apparently. All is well, and they embark back to Burgundy. Once again, Siegfried takes a trivial task and works as a messenger that tells everyone the good news, and wedding party is being prepared. Also, Siegfried gets to marry Kriemhild at the same day. During the wedding party, Brunhild weeps that Gunther's sister has to marry a mere vassal. Gunther gives a vague answer about Siegfried's position, but the seeds of distrust is being sown here. Then there is a quite detailed description of how the wedding bed is being consumed, and two become one with Siegfried and Kriemhild. But Gunther does not have such good luck with his Amazon pride, who wants to know the truth about Siegfried. Gunther tries to take her by force, but Brunhild ties him down and goes to sleep. At least she lets him go in the morning before servants come in. Gunther's ego is totally shattered, and he confides to Siegfried about his troubles. Siegfried is moved by the trust shown to him and agrees to help Gunther. So Siegfried once again uses his invisibility cloak and barely manages to subdue Brunhild in a wrestling match. When she submits, Siegfried takes a belt and a ring as a trophy and keeps his promise to Gunther not to consume the wedding bed. Then Gunther comes in and Brunhild loses her virginity, and along that disappears her magical strength. Now you are properly starting to see the twisted morals of this tale, but this is not even the worst part. What is being outlined here is how important women's virginity is and how man's honor is tied to it. If you think men are amoral in these stories, then the female figures have also very dubious moral choices that they make out through this tale. Only exception is that women at least cry after doing wrong moral choices and showing some regret, but not men. They just push on and find their mistakes as minor inconveniences. So where do we go from here? Siegfried goes back to his Netherland realm, or that Nibelungen place in Norway. It is really hard to tell where his court is. He and Kriemhild have a son after 10 years of marriage, and so does Brunhild and Gunther. But we are not even halfway of the poem, so there's no happy ending yet. Brunhild still believes that Siegfried is his lord's vassal and never pays tribute to him. She wants him to come for a visit, and they do. At first, things are going great, as they attend church sermons together, but soon it is Kriemhild that breaks their equal footing by claiming that Siegfried is so much better than anyone else in this realm. The argument ensues, and Kriemhild makes even worse claims. She basically shows the belt and ring that Siegfried took from Brunhild and claims that Siegfried took her virginity and that she is a whore. Quite an escalation. Gunther and Siegfried are being polite to each other, and Siegfried denies the whole affair. Gunther is happy with this, but remember that Charkte Hagen, vassal and a knight for Gunther. Up to this point he has made some very harsh and realistic marks about any situation at hand, and seems to be suspicious and gloomy about different situations in the kingdom. But at this point, he is furious for Brunhild's honor, and his lord's honor for the same matter. He wants to murder Siegfried. Hagen is a very interesting character that seems to be in Gunther's favor, and talks over his lord many times. He always gets his way through. Now we have had many lines of the poem dedicated to fashion, tournaments, and generous ways to give tribute, but when it comes to the moral struggle to have a murder plot for Siegfried, we don't get that many lines. The scheme of the murder plot gets more lines than the moral argument for killing Siegfried. Siegfried has been outstanding friend to Gunther, but when Hagen briefly mentions that they could expand their realm, then Gunther basically goes, "Oh, okay, let's do it then." Like I said, it is morally bankrupt story, and we will get back to this conflict of morality later on. Let's continue with the story. They deceive Siegfried by fake messengers that pretend to work for the Danes and Saxons. They claim new war is coming, although last time it was wrapped up in a good fate. Siegfried is of course a loyal friend and goes to stop the attack. Kriemhild seems to remember the prophecy from her dream and makes Hagen to go along with her husband to protect him. She reveals that one spot in the back was covered by a leaf when Siegfried bathed in the dragon blood. So he should watch his back, and even marks the spot with a cross to Siegfried's clothes. Well, the army is stopped before they reach Saxony when these fake messengers once again bring out message of peace. Siegfried is disappointed there is no war, but they decide to go hunt instead. They have a little competition, and Siegfried of course wins, and even manages to kill a lion somehow, and plays a little joke by releasing a bear in the camp. While enjoying the feast and fresh protein, Siegfried gets very salivated, but alas, there has been a logistical problem. The wine and mead has been brought to the wrong place, and there's nothing to drink. But thankfully, Hagen knows a nearby spring where to get a drink. The tension is building up, but Minstrel breaks up the gloomy mood of the audience with a little joke. Although murder and deception are horrible things, it is nothing compared to being without a cup of wine. I'm sure someone remembered to fill the minstrel's cup after this line. There's a little race to the spring, and when Siegfried goes for a drink, spear from Hagen penetrates him from the back. He has still a little fight in him, but is without his weapons because they took a race to the spring. He knocks Hagen down with his shield, but succumbs to his wound. Men gather around him to weep, and Siegfried condemns their actions. Hagen is defiant and says that everything is fine now, and nothing can really threaten them now. At least Gunther shows some respect and promises to take good care of Kriemhild. Then we get the long funeral of Siegfried, and Kriemhild is in total despair. She blames herself for being rude to Brunhild and for trusting Hagen. All the men lie and claim it was some highwaymen that killed him, but Kriemhild challenges them to come closer to the body to swear their innocence, and when they do, purple blood starts to pulp out from the closed wounds of Siegfried to showcase that they are lying. Gunther defends Hagen even at this scene of a miracle. Once again, I don't know if this is actually a Christian miracle, but a pagan belief that spirits guide us and you can connect to them by touching the corpse. But let's leave that simmer in the background. There's no confession of guilt from anyone. There is a 3-day Lent, and Kriemhild gives away a lot of the Nibelung treasure that is brought to the court for common people. For the first time in the poem, we see some restraint with the cavalier finances, and Hagen wants to stop Kriemhild wasting away the Nibelung treasure that now sits in their realm. Everyone disagrees with him, but once again he gets his way, and even showcases some greed by sinking the treasure to nearby lake for later recovery. This hurts Kriemhild even more, but somehow Hagen just gets away with these actions. It is curious that now the court of Burgundy are known as Nibelungs. Did Hagen really defend Brunhild's honor, or did he want the treasure for himself? Siegfried's father returns to his realm and wants Kriemhild to follow her and to rule in the realm. She refuses and wants to stay with her family and abandons her own son of Siegfried, as an orphan. Once again, it is not only the moral choices of the men that are dubious, but also the moral choices of the women. Then we are halfway through. Years pass and Kriemhild just wallows in her sorrow until Attila, the Hun, becomes a widow and wants a beautiful Christian Kriemhild for himself. The task is taken upon by his German vassal Rudiger, who leaves to the city of Worms. Burgundy court is ready to let Kriemhild choose with the marriage, except Hagen, who smells danger in this situation. This is the one time they should actually listen to him, but everyone wants Kriemhild to be happy. Only way Rudiger managed to persuade Kriemhild is by promising possibility to avenge for Siegfried's murder by commanding the Huns. You probably see where this is going. She says yes and moves to Hungary and gives Attila a son called Ortlieb. She is still beautiful but full of sorrow, and when Hagen refuses to give her the Nibelung treasure while departing, it does not ease her mindset. Eventually, there will be a plan, and the plan is to invite the court of Burgundy to Attila's court. Hagen smells a trap, but Kriemhild's brothers are just fools and don't see anything wrong with this. Mother of the brothers and Kriemhild, called Ute, warns them not to go because she has seen a dream that they all will perish in the journey. You would think that Hagen would use this excuse to underline his suspicions towards Kriemhild, but surprisingly, he tells that nobody should be a prisoner of their dreams. He really is the figure of real power that thinks that the will of a man can pave his own path, no matter the moral code around him. So they embark, but the river of Danube is a troublesome river to cross. Hagen is sent to find a way to cross it, and he meets some water deities, nixies, and steals their clothes. In favor for returning them, he asks how to cross the river, and since they are water guardians that control the living beings' destiny, they tell him about the ferryman that works for the Bavarians and spies for them. They give a good advice how to be diplomatic with this ferryman, who is quite troublesome. Before leaving, one of the nixies says, "By the way, none of you are coming back, except that one court chaplain that is in your party." Hagen, being Hagen, believes that he can test the prophecy of the spirits of the dead, and goes to meet the ferryman. Of course, the way to cross the Danube could be handled in a civilized manner, but Hagen manages to anger the ferryman and ends up killing him. Thankfully, he is skilled in handling a ferry and manages to navigate 1,000 men across the Danube by himself. While transporting the chaplain, he decides to improvise with fate. If he kills the chaplain now, then the prophecy cannot be fulfilled. What do his travel companions, Christian knights, think about when they see this scene of a drowning clergyman? Well, they think it is not a very nice thing to do, but just stare at the bizarre scene. By a miracle, Chaplain makes it back to the shore and walks back to the home in Burgundy. Thus the prophecy is sealed. The Christian knights are more bewildered why Hagen is destroying the ferry after reaching the shore. He says he doesn't want to give a choice for anyone to be a coward and tells about the prophecy of the Nixons. The royal party is in shock, but decides to continue their journey, but this time prepared for battle. The ferryman's Bavarian brother arrives at night, and there's a brief battle where he is killed, and the losses are small. They arrive to Rudiger's realm and get great hospitality. Rudiger's daughter is even married to the king's brother. It makes me wonder how they know their fate, but still take such a great advantage of Rudiger's hospitality. They arrive to Huns' court in a battle march, but Attila welcomes them with open arms. Attila has no understanding of what is going on, but Kriemhild is calculating the situation all the time. How did Kriemhild plan his invitation all along? In the marriage bed, of course, in the middle of love-making. And of course, Attila agreed to throw a feast for her family. Kriemhild wonders why Hagen has arrived in here, when he is obviously not welcomed. Hagen has no remorse and agitates Kriemhild. There's a plan to separate the party, but Dietrich, a fellow German in Attila's court, warns them that Kriemhild is struck by sorrow and plans for revenge. They continue being prepared, and the situation remains tense. They even go to church in full armor and arms. Hagen and violinist Volkner become strong brothers in arms, and one night, by mere presence, they scare away hundreds of Huns coming to kill them. Kriemhild starts to do something that is not seen in the German court. He starts to bribe warriors to take action against them. When she finally gets Attila's little brother to attack Hagen's little brother Dankwart, they manage to kill most of the knights and squares, but Dankwart manages to hold them back and battles his way through the court of Attila, where the rest of the party is having a feast. Before arriving there, Attila is proudly presenting his only son Ortlieb, hoping that the son could be raised in the Burgundy court and become a great warrior of his own. Hagen makes a really somber remark, how there's a mark of death in the boy and he will die even if he grows up to be a man. You just have to wonder how does Gunther let this man speak and interact with others. The young Ortlieb is sitting on the table, and the minstrel here blames Kriemhild for putting his son in there, because now Dankwart barges in and tells them that the battle has commenced, and most of the men have been murdered by Huns. Hagen says that let's have a blood offering for the deceased Siegfried, and swing his sword and decapitates Ortlieb, and the severed head falls into the lap of Kriemhild. Hagen starts his berserk mode, and everyone is bound to follow him. He cuts the hands from the court violinist, who wonders what is his purpose now in life. Attila just stares at the carnage in despair. Dietrich of Bern just says to himself that the Hagen is going to finish his bitter drink all the way. But soon Kriemhild begs him to save the situation. Dietrich blows to his horn and manages to call for a truce. Attila and Kriemhild are allowed to leave with the fellow knights of Bern, and also Rudiger and his party can leave the room also. Everyone else is getting butchered, and thousands of Huns are going to die as they try to enter the room as a reinforcement. At this point, we should see Kriemhild as the enemy and feel sympathy for the German underdogs. But no, I don't feel it. I still remember Siegfried, and Hagen just decapitated an innocent child. This carnage goes on for a long time. Many heroes try to go there to defeat the 5 main members of the court, but most of them fail. When they try to burn the place, those heroic German knights drink some blood from the dead bodies and put out the fire with the blood of the corpses. Thousands of Huns die in the small corridor, and when the Germans ask them to gather the wounded, they instead kill the helpers. I really have no sympathy for them, and I'm just hoping them to die at this point. Finally, it takes Germans to defeat Germans, and there's a lengthy lines how Rudiger is having a great conflict with his duty and is forced to attack these so-called noble knights. I am sorry, I am not weeping here like all the other men for the sense of honor. What about Siegfried? Where was the honor in that calculated murder? This must have been a very entertaining part for the audience, but I am not buying it. What I am waiting for is to have a confession of guilt for what they did to Siegfried. Unfortunately, that is not the payoff that we're getting here. There's a huge leap in storytelling by the times of William Shakespeare, where we get clear moral conclusions. There is none in here. In the end, Gunther and Hagen is taken as prisoners, and Kriemhild is more interested about the treasure of Nibelung. As an audience member, I don't want the treasure. I want them to admit their wrongdoing towards Siegfried. Hagen stays defiant to the end, even when Gunther's decapitated head is presented to him and he meets his own death. An older German knight takes offense for killing of prisoners of war and ends up killing Kriemhild. That funny minstrel says he knows what happened next, but we are not going to hear that in here. You have to pay him now. So there it is. Medieval mindset at its best. Is this the masculine virtue that you seek for? Power and strength without moral sense? Sure, like in all epics, it is the women that set in motion the action and cause the fall of men. But is there really nothing that we can do? We can't take one chink at our honor to admit our faults, to stop our destiny of downfall. And what really leads to downfall? The confession of doubt or the pure primal drive towards a goal.